Something is rotten in the state of Norfolk, as the Lotus team are looking increasingly adrift as the season goes on, and with a three-time and defending world champion at the wheel and identical engines to the all-conquering McLarens, the problem has to be the car. Piquet does seem to be closer on lap times to Nakajima than Senna was, which suggests to some that he might be lacking motivation, though he's also still feeling the effects of his big shunt at Imola last year. Last year's Tyrrell was the class of the atmospheric field, but it's a bigger field this year, and the 017 doesn't seem quite as good a chassis. Jonathan Palmer's still getting the most out of it, while rookie Bailey has struggled a bit more and failed to qualify on a couple of occasions, but Julian's learning the ropes and he'll hope to improve as the season goes on. Frank and Patrick always knew that 1988 was going to be a transitional year, but they had maybe hoped for a bit more than this, until Mansell's Silverstone heroics just 1 point and Nigel hadn't finished a race. The culprits are the Judd engine, which, while a decent little package, has been prone to overheating, and the experimental reactive suspension, which has been a bit of a liability. Mansell's been down this road before with Lotus and will hope he's seen the back of it until it's either developed properly or he's out the door to Ferrari. The little West German team are, as usual, struggling to get their homebrewed turbo engine to develop all the power it has on paper and to get to the end of the race. Even at the power circuits, the cars are struggling to qualify against the theoretically lower-powered 3.5-litre cars, and the inexperienced Schneider is suffering more of the pair. As usual, there are rumours that the team are on the verge of withdrawal. They're calling them Team Perfect, and the record speaks for itself. They've won 8 races out of 8 so far, 5 of them 1-2 finishes. It's possible that they're being flattered by the fact that all of their main competitors seem to be having a crisis of some sort, but you can't really argue with the championship tables, where the team aren't far off beating Williams' whole season total for 1987, and it's already pretty obvious that either Prost is going to take his 3rd title, or Senna his 1st. The little French garagistes have come good in just their 2nd full season in F1. They still don't quite have the reliability there, but Straff usually qualifies in the top half of the grid and runs solidly in midfield, often dicing with the Loti, Benettons and Ligiers. 6 retirements from 8 tell the story, but hopefully if the men from Gonferrand can get that under control, they will realise their potential. Another team in their 2nd full year in their current incarnation anyway, and doing fairly well. Like AGS, reliability has been a problem and Mauricio Gugelmin has had the worst end of that, but both drivers have looked lively when called upon, and Gugelmin's 4th place in just his 8th Grand Prix is no less than he and the team deserve. The Arrows team are enjoying one of their best years yet, but you sense they're still underperforming a little, with Heine Maida still stumped as to why the Megatron engines keep popping off their pop-off valves too early, limiting how much power they can develop. Drivers Warwick and Cheever seem to be enjoying themselves mostly though, fighting a series of private battles on tracks around the world and getting on famously out of the cockpit too. Benetton have frequently touted pre-race as a possible dark horse winner and have visited the podium 3 times so far, but you sense that the only way they could snatch a win is if all 4 McLarens and Ferraris break down or crash. The Benettons are rarely seen mixing it at the very front. Boutsen has transitioned well into the team leader role, while the jury is still out on Nannini. He's clearly fast, but he also has shown a hot-headed streak that gets him into trouble. The gallant little Osella team still plug away despite their equipment getting ever more antiquated. They have at least qualified most of the time, and Larini kept it out of the barriers on the streets of Monaco to get an encouraging 9th place finish, but it's slim pickings as ever. Unfortunately, they will now drop into pre-qualifying for the remainder of the season, so how that will affect their qualifying record we'll have to see. Rial's debut season has had all the drama we've come to expect from a Günther Steiner team, with a falling out behind the scenes with Gustav Brunner and a sense of barely restrained chaos about the team. But the chassis is actually pretty decent. They've been qualifying well and De Cesaris hasn't got himself into too much trouble. 4th in Detroit was still a bit of a surprise, but it didn't feel like a completely freak result, and it's pulled them out of pre-qualifying for the rest of the season to boot. Minardi were looking forward to a better 1988 after ditching the sluggish Motori Moderni turbos for some light Ford V8s, but performances haven't really picked up since. New boy Sala rather showed up team leader Campos until 3 DNQs on the trot proved too much and Adrian was out on his ear, and Pierluigi Martini came back and immediately scored his and the team's first ever point on his first outing. That has helped morale, and the 2 drivers have been pushing each other much better since. Ligier are having easily their worst season since the catastrophe of 1983 and have racked up 5 DNQs and just 3 finishes between the two drivers so far, including that infamous double DNQ at their home race on the weekend of Arnoux' 40th birthday. The problem is the car. The engine's the same Judd that does okay, if not spectacularly, in the March and Williams cars, but the innovative chassis with its 4 small fuel tanks distributed around the chassis has proved heavy and unbalanced. Ferrari have been the only team other than McLaren who've looked even remotely like they might win a race this year, and even then it hasn't ever really looked like they can give them an actual race. They look bright enough early on, and Berger will hang on to the McLarens for a few laps, but soon enough have to dial it back and cruise slowly to the finish to conserve fuel, often ending up lapped by the end. Internal politics prevail as ever, and Alboretto's never really impressed since his 1985 title tilt. The Tifosi will just have to look forward to the new management era and Nigel Mansell for 1989 onwards. It's been a frustrating first half of the season for Gerard Larrousse and co, with reliability the Achilles heel, but if you want to see the positives, the team are often close to the points, just needing a little more luck to score at the end. They certainly deserve a break. Larrousse is a talented man, and both Alio and Delmas look decent and pretty closely matched. They'll be hoping to make their mark more in the back straight. As you might expect, the Coloni team have struggled more on the high-speed circuits, failing to pre-qualify in France and Britain, and Detroit, but that's always a tricky one for a first-timer. An 8th place in Canada might be down to high attrition, but as the saying goes, first you have to finish. The team are enthusiastic, but have very limited resources, as witness their fairly sponsor-free lemon-yellow bodywork. A decent enough start for the EuroBruns, who haven't had too much trouble getting through PQ, and usually qualify both cars too. But Euro Racing's organisation was a bit of a shambles last time round when they were running Alfa Romeo, and getting to the finish line has become a problem, with a brace of 12th places for the highly fancied Modena the best they have to show for it. Still, they're not embarrassing themselves, and with their lack of sponsorship and Larrouche's limited single-seater experience, that's perhaps the best they can hope for. It was Detroit before the talented Caffi saw a checkered flag waving in his general direction, but again the Italians are on a steep learning curve and will feel like 8th in the Motor City and 2 more finishes in the next 2 races a progress. The neat little Dallara designed and built chassis seems to have potential, rarely having a problem qualifying and often running well in midfield.